About this trial. Pamela Davis is a former federal and state prosecutor from New York. Pamela, great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
And Joanna Greenwald is a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. Joanna, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let me begin with you, Joanna. What kind of impression does this make on the jury when we're hearing about a body down and then the SWAT officers being so concerned about the victims and other shooters?
Well, I think just it's obvious. I think that the impression that they make is that the man's guilty. This is a horrific incident that you have women shot, specifically a pregnant woman, that she has to guard herself. You have a lot that I think that their hearts go out, their hearts break. So I think the defense is going to have an awful time overcoming just this testimony alone.
And you know, Joanna, what strikes me is the juxtaposition of this SWAT officer, a first responder, who's got tremendous compassion for the victims. Of course, he's concerned about making sure everybody's okay. One woman is already dead. He doesn't know what else is going on. Later, we're going to hear some testimony about concern for the 14-year-old girl who was there, shielding her eyes so she doesn't see the body of her friend lying there. And compare that to Naveed Haq, who really seems to have no concern whatsoever for what he's done, either at the time or at any time since.
Exactly. His lack of remorse, the fact that the type of people he went at. Like, if you think about it, when a boat goes down, what do they say? Women and children first. So what would happen is you have women who are hit, and that's seen as like a protected class, if you will. Then you have a child, a 14-year-old, then we'll hear about a pregnant woman. These are places that you don't go. And people looking at him, and the impression looking at him, where you have a middle-aged man who failed to accomplish in life, and who are the people that suffer? Women and children.
And I think that does make an impression on the jury. Pamela Davis, on the other hand, our system about his history of being bipolar, schizoaffective disorder, that he's got paranoid delusions. And by the time the jury hears all that, they may forget about gripping little facts of this case, like the blood on the 9 and the blood on the 1, when a pregnant, wounded Dana Klein is trying to call for help.
I disagree with you. I don't think anyone's going to forget anything about pregnant Dana Klein. They're not going to forget there was a 14-year-old there. They're not going to forget that other women were shot there. As a defense attorney, I would say that you do your best to put on the psychiatric defense that he's bipolar, as well as at a manic stage, as well as with schizophrenic, where are paranoid delusions that are going on along that, and you do your best. But unfortunately, in this state, they filed the M'Naughton rule, which is a pretty strict standard, which asks for you not only to know the nature and quality of your actions, but also to be able to appreciate right from wrong. It's a pretty high standard, and rarely can people achieve that. So the defense is going to try it. I don't really think they'll be successful at it.
Yeah, I mean, Pamela Davis, we know that the insanity defense is asserted fairly regularly, but almost never prevails. It does sometimes. Andrew Yates, John Hinckley, it does sometimes, but it is rare, right?
It's pretty rare, and people are concerned. The jurors
is likely what the prosecution will argue.
Yeah, you know, over the years, Beth, as we've watched these trials together, I think I've had to conclude one of the least appealing legal defenses to me is I brought a loaded gun into a situation, I pulled the trigger, I fired, I killed people, I injured people, but I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do it, and juries don't react well to that kind of a defense either. We do have the statement, Beth, that you just referred to from Naveed Haq's parents. Let's take a look. They said, this is right after the shooting, they said, "We are shocked and devastated with this tragic event. Our hearts and condolences go to the family of the deceased lady. Our deepest sympathies go to those who have been injured, and we pray for their speedy recovery. We could not have imagined for a moment that our son would do this senseless act. This is utterly contrary to our beliefs and Islamic values. We have always believed and practiced in fostering love, peace, and harmony with everyone, irrespective of religion, race, and ethnicity." You know, that's such a lovely statement to me. And Joanna Greenwald, let me bring you back in on that point. It's surprising to me that Naveed Haq would come from a family that seems to be such gracious people who believe in tolerance, who believe in equality, diametrically opposed from a man who would go in with a gun spouting this anti-Semitic venom.
Well, the first thing is that the father, as we've seen from prior statements, the father started a mosque himself, and the Quran, if anyone looks at it, the belief system, It doesn't say that. It's completely against murder, shooting, or anything like that.
Sure.
So their son's behavior is completely against their teachings and their belief systems. And from my understanding, he has not been practicing much as a Muslim. But this goes against their whole family and their belief systems. I'm sure they're probably very concerned about shame on their family's name and in their community. So their son, I believe, is not a reflection of who this family is and their belief systems.
Beth Karas, Detective Don Ledbetter finished his marathon testimony yesterday. He testified over a number of days. How did that go over in the courtroom?
Well, I think that there were some...
Yeah, all right. Well, Joanna Greenwald, let me bring you back in because there's a lot of people who are bipolar. This is a very common diagnosis. My own father was bipolar all of his life. He never hurt a flea. Most people who are mentally ill never hurt anyone. So the fact that he's bipolar, that's not going to get you all the way to the finish line, is it?
That's not going to win. That's not going to win you the trophy. No, that's not going to do it. What they're going to look for is they're going to put on that an insanity defense. This case really boils down to that you have the battle of the psychiatrists, and they're going to say, well, if you don't think that he's insane, then it's a diminished capacity case. And the seminal case that they have right now in Washington that follows what the standard for diminished capacity is Washington v. Ferrick. And it's still a pretty strict standard that they're going to use. And people are going to, the jury again, it's going to go back to the jury. They're going to say most people don't go crazy. They don't go and shoot up people, and they don't have a place where you're dealing with a hate crime. But part of the specific things that must be proven if someone's charged with malicious harassment, which is their hate crime in Washington, is that they have to show that they maliciously and intentionally. So in going with that, that's what they're going to be going for, is the intent, and that he didn't have the requisite intent because he was unable to appreciate this crime and this charge, and he wasn't going after Jews. He was just off his rocker and saying whatever came out first.
Beth Karas, let me go to you because Joanna Greenwald brings up a good point. There's actually two issues in this case. There's the not guilty by reason of insanity defense and diminished capacity. Those are two separate things, right? You know, Karen, one nice part of this story that I think gets overlooked is after the shooting, which certainly sounded like a hate crime, looked like a hate crime, we didn't have riots, we didn't have reprisals, we didn't have sectarian violence, as would happen in a lot of places in the world. What we have is just a regular old criminal trial, and to me, that's a good thing about our country.
I agree, and I think the other thing was his family also wrote a wonderful letter saying how, you know, they felt very bad about what happened.
Yeah.
And not sort of trying to excuse him. I think that was also another element that helped heal the community.
His parents did write a beautiful letter. We read it a little bit earlier on in the program, but you know, Joanna Greenwald, they didn't say anything in the letter about their son being mentally ill.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that somehow that was omitted? No, our son is wackadoo. No one pay attention. No, I think that that was obviously intentional. They obviously had their own counsel helping them with that letter. Of course, they know that their son had issues. And again, I know that you asked before, but I think the defense is going to bring in his anecdotal history of his prior acts. He was charged previously with lewd conduct. And he's had behavioral problems in the past. They're going to bring that in. And the defense is also, and this hasn't been said, that they're going to say, my guess, is that he had a manic episode. And a manic episode in the DSM-4, you're dealing with someone who's extremely, like Rabbi Shmuley was just saying, how could he plan this? How could he do this? I'll tell you how. He had a manic episode, and when you have a manic episode, you're extremely goal-oriented, extremely determined in what it is that you want to accomplish. So him going onto Google, apparently that was it, him finding directions, him driving, him picking out people, him picking people because they were Jewish, all of that goes into the grand plan of being in a manic episode of someone who's bipolar and somebody who has, again, additional psychotic interests. Yeah. And you'll be seeing that. And one last thing I thought was very interesting is that I believe you said he had asked for Larry King. Yeah. And here we say the Jews are in the media. And wait a minute, let me go on to Larry King.
That's a good point.
How about that one? That's great.
Yeah, yeah. Or even Lisa Bloom's show.
Hey,
we're talking
Lisa,
about it right here.
Her.
There is a certain irony in that, isn't there? Well, big thanks to Pamela Davis for joining us this morning. Great to see you again, Pam.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
And should background checks for gun sales include psychological evaluations? What about it? When we come back, we'll hear what you had to say about that as we reveal the answer to our question of the day. Stay with us. Although Naveed Haq does have a long history history of mental illness. And when we get to the defense case, we're going to start hearing a lot more about it. Well, we have such a distinguished and intelligent group with us today. I'm going to deviate from my usual questions and just go around the horn and get everybody's final thought on this case. Let me start here in New York with our guest, criminal defense attorney Joanna Greenwald. Joanna, final thought?
My final thought is bet on the prosecutor. It's better than house odds.
I think you're probably right about that one. In Miami, Florida, joining us from his family vacation for Pesach, Rabbi